Muy bien. Vení. Toma. No. Vago, no. No.
Vago, no vas a destrozar.
No. Toma. Vení. Toma. Toma.
Why does my dog grab things and run away with them? Is my dog a bad dog? Is my dog ever going to change? Am I doing things wrong? I've been told that my dog is impossible. And this is one of the questions that I get more asked often. Why does my dog grab things and run away with them, and what can I do? Well, imagine, I'm sure that you've lived this situation. If you're watching this video, your dog has the sock or the remote control or the chicken you left on the counter for 30 seconds and he is, boom, gone, even with your shoes. And you know exactly what comes next. You go after him, he speeds up, you get angry, he swallows it. Or you spend the next hour negotiating with a dog who is absolutely winning. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you stop and you think, why can't he just stop? That question is exactly what this video is about. Why does my dog swallow things when I try to take them away? And if you've lived this situation, your dog gets your shoes, he gets your whatever he finds in the house, the toy, and you think that, because you know that he's gonna swallow it, and when you go try to catch it, your dog runs very fast because he knows that you're gonna try to catch it. You're gonna be opening his mouth, putting your hand in. I'm laughing, but it's not something to laugh. You put your hand onto his mouth and try to take the sock away because your dog is gonna swallow it. Are you going to end up on the veterinary service? Or if not, your dog grows and he shows his teeth to you because your dog is learning that he has to run away, and there is something that he wants and he has to run away because otherwise you're gonna take it off. And you might think, no, he thinks it's a game. No, he's learning and he swallows it quickly because if not, I'm gonna take it away. Well, your dog doesn't think this is a game, but also, on one hand, this is going to also influence your recall, and you're not going to have just problems with your recall, but you're going to have problems with your dog staying, with your dog listening to you, because there is a main base on what is happening here is that your dog is not able to stop, connect with you, open his mouth and let go. Sometimes we have tried to train our dogs to give him a treat, so he opens the mouth and give that object away. And that is not learning to stop doing. This is an exchange. I exchange you a treat for what you have on your mouth. So your dog's brains continue doing. I do, I do, I do. And your dog knows that swallowing the object works. Every single time it works. And every single time he's gonna run faster and farther away from you. And behaviors reinforce themselves. So every time your dog does this behavior, he's gonna to do it more often and he's gonna do it quicker and more intensively. And because this is exactly how learning works in every brain. Behaviors reinforce themselves and your dog is not learning to stop. So the first time your dog swallowed something to keep it, maybe it was accidental, but it worked. The treat disappeared. You are the treat trying to remove that, and the object stay his. And his brain stores that information. So next time he does it sooner, with less hesitation, because his brain is learning to do so. Until the moment you move toward him, before you've been reaching him, he's already swallowed it. Not because he planned to do so, but because his brain learned. And there is the painful part. Every time you chase him, you make it worse. Not because you did something wrong, but because chasing is exciting and it activates his nervous system. It makes having the object even more valuable and going farther away from you. You were trying to solve the problem and his brain was learning to do it better and more. Why does my dog steal food from the table and will not stop? Why does my dog steal food even though he knows it is wrong? Well, for your dog it's hard to stop if he doesn't know how to stop. If we have been treating, I'm going to switch this for the other thing, his brain has never learned to stop and he keeps doing and doing. And maybe your dog has also a background with some anxiety, maybe getting bored, not being able to listen to you. So I want to tell you something about guilt. When you come home and you find the kitchen counter clear because your dog had eaten everything, and your dog looks at you with those eyes, tail down, ears back, that is not guilt. You think my dog is telling me that he's guilt because he has done something that he knows is wrong. Well, that is not what is happening, and the science on this is very clear. That expression is your dog reacting to your emotional state. He sees your tension and he responds to it. He's not connecting your reaction right now to what he did 20 minutes ago, which means the scolding after the fact, as satisfying as it might feel, taught him nothing about the stealing. It taught him something different, that when you come home looking tense, something unpleasant is about to happen. And the stealing continues because nobody ever gave his brain the capacity to feel that that impulse is not an act on it. Nobody had taught your dog to stop doing. Why is my dog's behavior getting worse even though I keep correcting him? Why is my dog behavior getting worse even though I keep training my dog and he keeps stealing things? Well, because the correction works sometimes on the behavior that you can see. But the behavior that you can see, as you might already know, is just the 10% of the iceberg. And there is something much more that started long before. And every time the behavior works, even once, the neuronal pathway gets stronger. And I want to describe the family I see every week. They've tried everything: correction, commands, management, trainers, ethologues. Some of them have even working on his for 2-3 years. Imagine 3 years working on this. And they arrive at my door saying the same thing. He knows what he's doing, he looks right at me, and he does it anyway. But here's what actually happened. Their dog doesn't have a discipline problem, his brain has missing a skill. He has never learned to stop. Not to stop when someone tells him to only, but not to stop when there is a consequence. Stop from the inside, really learn to stop. The internal capacity to feel the impulse, the sock on the floor, the food on the counter, the open bin, and stop before acting on it. That capacity was never built. And without it, correction after correction just creates a more stressed, more confused dog who is still stealing and now also anxious about his relationship with you. The dog ends up locked in another room when you have guests. You're running after him in the park. You're waiting at the vet. Not because he's a bad dog, because his brain never learned the one skill that changes everything. Your dog hasn't learned to stop. And this brings us to this question: is my dog a bad dog? Is he never going to change? Because I'm sure most of you have been told that your dog is never going to change, that he is like this and you have to learn to live with this. Well, let me tell you that this is not true, and you are not a bad parent either if you're here watching me, and your dog is not a bad dog. Let me explain you how it works. If your dog is stealing these things, your dog might have some stress. Check the previous episodes with the balance, okay? But your dog is not learning to stop. If you've been, well, as we said at the beginning of the video, if you're changing one thing from another, waiting for your dog to open his mouth with the sock when he's at a high emotional level. Remember in one of the chapter series that we have, the 5 emotional levels, when your dog grabs something with his mouth, he's going to highly jump into higher emotional levels. And the behavior that he's been doing of running away, that has been reinforcing itself because it's now here on his brain at the beginning, okay? So that behavior is reinforcing itself. And your dog is at a high emotional level, and for him it's hard to connect and listen to you. Stop what he's doing, drop it, and even listen to you. So that's why he runs away. And it's not because he's a bad dog. Yes, well, sometimes you might think, my dog wants me to run after him. If you can change this into a play space with a structure and rules, for example, your dog is not gonna go running away with what he has on his mouth. If it's the case that you wanna play with your dog, this is not a game. So what is happening is that your dog's brain doesn't know how to stop. And that is not a character flaw, it's a capacity that was never built. And that's a complete different problem with a complete different solution. Every time a behavior fires and produces a result, the result that your dog wants, that neuronal pathway gets a little deeper, a little faster, a little more automatic. The sock on the floor on his mouth, the impulse, the action, it worked. That loop runs 1,000 times until your dog is choosing to steal. He's already stealing before he's had the chance to choose any other thing. And it's neurology. And here's what this means on how you respond to that moment. When your dog is activated, when he has the sock and he's running, going to help him is not rewarding the behavior. Think about a child who is overwhelmed, dysregulating, spinning out. You do not leave him alone to figure it out. You do not punish the dysregulation. You regulate with him. You bring your calm to his chaos, because emotional states are not behaviors. We do not reinforce emotions, even though you've been told that. We change emotions. Well, we can reinforce our behaviors, but not emotions. You can only regulate emotion. The behavior reinforces itself, and the emotional state needs support. Those are two completely different things. Confusing them is exactly what makes things worse. Why doesn't leave it or drop it work when my dog really wants something? Why is my dog not being able to leave what he has on his mouth? Because leave it and drop it are transactions. They work when both parties are coming off to negotiate. Above the emotional threshold, check previous series, the command is invisible, the treat is irrelevant, and the nervous system is already committed to that action. Remember the emotional levels from episode 2? When your dog sees something he really wants it, his level spikes. At level 2, leave it works. The brain is available. At level 4, the command doesn't land because your dog is not able to listen to you. His brain has already moved past the point where he can process anything else. Leave it and drop it are useful tools, but they manage the object in that moment. They do not build the internal capacity to stop. And that is the difference of everything. How do I teach my dog to stop? What is stop doing and why is it different from every other solution? Because stop doing is not a command, it's an internal capacity. The ability to feel the impulse and stop before acting on it. And when many dogs arrive to me, because if you know, here in Geneva I have a waiting list for several years, this is a capacity that every single dog that comes to me, because other trainers could not work with them, have in common. They haven't learned to stop, and they keep, from one reason or from the other, with all the emotion that this can cause and behind the ice, under the iceberg, remember the iceberg, but they all have this lack of capacity. They haven't learned to stop. And this stop is where the brain learns to choose, and it changes everything. So let's think of, we have two columns here. On one side, leave it, drop it, no, stop commands that they work from the outside in. They depend on you being present, on the dog being below the threshold, on the command being hard. On the other side, stop doing an internal capacity that works from the inside out. It doesn't depend on a command, it doesn't depend on you being in the room, it doesn't depend on the emotional level. It is the break. For example, when I'm walking outside with my dog and she sees a piece of pizza, if I tell her to stop, she is going to stop because I have built it and she has the capability to do so and because she trusts me. Okay, that is very important. The moment of stop between the trigger and the reaction. And in the pause, the brain can choose. Not because you have asked simply, not because there is a consequence coming, because the nervous system has learned that it can stop. And this is what I build with every dog I work with. This is why I have a waiting list, because dogs do not know how to stop, among other things. But it's not a better command, it's a brain that has learned to pause. What is happening with my dog? What is wrong with my dog? Why is it wrong to work on the behavior in the moment that it happens? Well, here is one of the most important things I teach, and it's the opposite of what most people do. You cannot build a new capacity in the middle of the problem. Think about learning to drive. You didn't learn in the middle of a rush hour traffic, you learned in an empty car park when the brain was calm, when there was a space to process, when mistakes had no consequence. And then, gradually, you move into more complex situations because the capacity existed first, because you have been learning first. Your dog is exactly the same. You cannot teach stop doing when he's already running with the sock. His brain is above the threshold. The neuronal pathway for stealing is already firing. There is nothing else available in that moment. The work has to happen before. In calm conditions, below the threshold, in structured play, as we said, in exercises that teach the nervous system to feel the impulse and pause. Not in front of the sock, not when he's already gone, but before. That is the work that changes everything permanently. Not management, not better commands, not consequence, but a capacity built in a calm that transfer to chaos. That's what we do. We strengthen capacities and then they will transfer to daily life. And we can strengthen capacities in a fun way. How do I teach my dog to stop without a command? Well, as we said, you build it below the threshold. Remember, building and using are not the same thing. And you build it in calm moments through this structured play, through exercise that teaches the nervous system to stop, not in front of the sock, not in the moment of the behavior. The brain can only learn to stop when it's available to learn. And this is why the families who come to me with dogs that have been labeled as impossible, 2 years with trainers, medication, last resort, start to see real change soon. Not because I found better technique for taking the sock, but because we stop working on the sock and start building what was missing, the capacity to stop, reinforcing the relationship, building in calm conditions, removing residual stress, helping with anxiety through play with a structure, through other exercises, not through 1,000 of repetitions that are boring and get everyone mad, but through connection and fun exercises. What should I do different this week? Well, stop chasing your dog because, as you know now, the behaviors reinforce themselves and your dog is gonna go farther and run quicker and swallow it. And start observing instead, because the chase is feeding the problem, and what you observe this week will tell you where the real work needs to happen. If your dog likes to play, you can play with the structure and stop teaching his brain to stop. Stop trading the sock for one treat. This week, when your dog grabs something and runs, stop. Don't chase him. I know it's hard, especially if it's something dangerous, but if it's the sock, the glove, the remote, stop and watch. Watch what his body does. What's the level of activation? Watch whether he comes backward towards you. Try to call him. Work on your relationship. Go for a walk. Try to do not work to help your dog remove that residual stress. Is he doing this because he's too excited? Is he doing this because he's bored? Why is my dog doing this? Why I cannot have guests over? As you know, this chasing your dog is influencing in many other behaviors. One of the behaviors is recall. Why does my dog recall fail when it matters most? Well, your dog doesn't steal because he doesn't respect you. He steals because his brain never learned to stop, and that can change. Now there is another moment where this exact missing skill shows up. As we said, is when you recall your dog because he's far away. He has to stop what he's doing, reconnect with you, turn back to you, and choose to come to you with stability. And he has to do it because your dog has to learn this capacity of stop doing and reconnect with you on the distance. And this is what we're going to be watching in next episode.